speech title, When India Redefined the Rules of the World. There are moments in history when a nation does more than rise. It reshapes the very structure of the world around it. India's story is not one of sudden triumph, but a steady, unstoppable transformation. A journey that began with hope and perseverance has now evolved into a global movement of innovation, leadership, and courage. India did not wait for permission to rise. It did not follow the old playbook of power or prosperity. It wrote a new one, guided by the strength of its people, the wisdom of its heritage, and the vision of its future. Today, when the world speaks of technology, diplomacy, or resilience, one truth stands clear: India has redefined the rules. It's not merely participating in the global game, it's changing how the game is played. India's transformation began with something invisible yet powerful: belief. Long before it became the world's fastest growing major economy or the hub of digital innovation, India first had to rediscover its sense of self. For generations, the world had told India what it could or could not be. But at some point, a quiet realization took root that a nation of over 1 billion people did not need validation from anyone else. The first step toward redefinition was not in policies or reforms, but in a mindset. That shift began when ordinary citizens started to believe that they could shape their own destiny. The young man from a small village who dared to dream of becoming a scientist. The young woman who refused to be defined by the limits of her surroundings and instead became an entrepreneur, a leader, a voice for others. The farmer who embraced modern tools to improve his yield, not waiting for miracles, but creating his own. Every act of courage, every step of self-reliance was a spark in a growing fire of national confidence. This wasn't just about optimism. It was about reclaiming agency. It was about saying, we are not the story that others tell about us. We will write our own. When India began to believe that its potential was greater than its problems, everything changed. The same streets, the same systems, the same institutions suddenly felt different because the people within them began to dream differently. Belief became the foundation for transformation. That belief didn't emerge overnight. It came through adversity, through moments of doubt, through setbacks and sacrifice. It came through generations who refused to let hope die, even when progress seemed distant. It came through parents who worked tirelessly so their children could study, through teachers who planted seeds of imagination in small classrooms, through innovators who built solutions out of scarcity. It was this collective belief that we can, that turned struggle into strength. When 1 billion people begin to move with that kind of conviction, the world can't help but pay attention. That's when India stopped asking, can we do it? And started declaring, we will do it. From space missions built on a fraction of the world's budgets, to technological revolutions connecting villages to the global economy, belief was the common thread. It wasn't arrogance, it was awareness, an awakening that greatness lives in every corner of this land. And so, the story of India's rise didn't begin in boardrooms or government halls. It began in hearts and minds, in the quiet determination of a nation that refused to accept limits, in the courage to dream bigger, to work harder, and to stand taller. The world began to notice because India began to believe. That is how the journey toward redefining the global game truly began, not with wealth, not with power, but with belief. A belief that the future wasn't something to wait for. It was something to create. There was a time when the world looked at India and saw potential, but not leadership. A place rich in talent, but dependent on others for direction. For years, the narrative suggested that India was a follower, that it could imitate success, but not define it. But something changed. India stopped looking outward for inspiration and began to look inward for innovation. It started to believe that it could not only play the game but reinvent it. That shift from imitation to innovation became one of the most powerful transformations in modern history. In every sector, from science to business, a quiet revolution began. It started in small labs in college dorms, in the hands of dreamers who refused to accept the idea that good enough was enough. Engineers began creating technology that didn't just serve a few but reached millions. Entrepreneurs stopped asking, "What can we copy?" and started asking, "What can we create?" The result was a wave of ingenuity that reshaped industries and redefined what it means to lead in the 21st century. India's innovation wasn't built in isolation. It was born out of necessity. Faced with limited resources and massive challenges, India didn't wait for the perfect conditions to innovate. It built solutions that were affordable, accessible, and adaptable. This mindset gave birth to what the world now calls frugal innovation, doing more with less, creating technology not for luxury, but for life. The world watched as India developed low-cost healthcare models, efficient renewable energy systems, and digital platforms that reached the most remote corners of the nation. It wasn't about luxury, it was about impact. Think about the digital payment revolution. While the world debated about the risks and readiness of going cashless, India went ahead and did it on a scale never seen before. Platforms like UPI transformed the economy, bringing millions into the formal financial system. A street vendor in Delhi, a farmer in Bihar, or a small shop owner in Kerala could now transact with a tap of a phone. This wasn't imitation. This was the innovation with inclusion. India didn't wait for the technology to come from somewhere else. It built it, scaled it, and made it work for everyone. The same spirit reached the stars. When India launched its Mars mission, the world took notice, not just because it succeeded, but because it did so at a fraction of the cost of other nations. It wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a statement that intelligence and imagination don't depend on wealth, they depend on will. From Chandrayaan to Aditya L1, India showed that innovation is not about following a path, but creating one where none existed before. This change wasn't limited to science and technology. It spilled into art, cinema, and culture. India began telling its own stories to the world, stories that reflected authenticity and pride. From startups challenging global giants to designers redefining sustainability, India's creativity began to influence the global market, not by imitation, but by identity. It began exporting not just goods, but ideas that inspired, connected, and transformed. What truly makes India's innovation remarkable is its humanity. It doesn't innovate just to impress investors or make headlines. It innovates to solve real problems: hunger, education, inequality, and access. It builds not for the elite, but for the everyday person. In doing so, it's rewriting what progress looks like, showing that innovation is not just about speed or profit, but about purpose. The rise of digital India, the success of indigenous technology, the strength of its startup ecosystem, all of it points to one truth: India no longer waits for permission to lead. It has stopped asking how others did it and started asking how it can do it better, smarter, and fairer. And that is what happens when a nation dares to believe in its own ideas. India's innovation is no longer about catching up. It's about setting the pace. It's not about fitting into the world's systems. It's about designing new ones. The world used to come to India for inspiration from its past. Now it comes for innovation for the future. That shift from imitation to innovation is not just a change in strategy. It's a declaration of self-reliance, confidence, and creativity, the kind that only comes from a nation that knows who it is and where it's going. India's story has always been one of diversity, a land that breathes in many languages, worships in many ways, and dreams in 1,000 colors. Yet what makes this country remarkable is not the difference itself, but the unity that emerges from it. In a world often divided by borders, ideologies, and prejudice, India stands as living proof that diversity is not a burden to be managed, but a strength to be celebrated. Its power lies not in uniformity, but in harmony, the ability to hold countless voices together in one collective rhythm. From the Himalayas to the southern coasts, from bustling cities to quiet villages, India carries within it every shade of human experience. Each region has its own traditions, dialects, and stories, yet somehow it all fits. The greatness of this nation has never come from erasing differences, but from embracing them. In fact, India's diversity has been its greatest teacher, teaching the world that understanding does not come from sameness, but from coexistence. It is easy to build strength when everyone looks, speaks, and thinks alike. The true test of strength is to stand united when people are different, when they come from different faiths, backgrounds, and beliefs, yet choose to walk together. That is what India has done for centuries. The power to coexist in difference is woven into its cultural DNA. It's in the festivals that belong to everyone, in the shared meals across communities, in the songs that blend ancient traditions with modern dreams. India's democracy, too, is a reflection of this diversity. It gives voice to the farmer and the engineer, to the artist and the teacher, to the rich and the poor alike. In every election, millions of people of every background stand equal in line, their vote carrying the same weight. That image alone tells the story of a nation that truly believes in equality, not as an idea, but as a way of life. Diversity has never been a challenge to India's democracy. It has been its foundation. And this principle goes beyond borders. India's approach to global relations is shaped by the same philosophy: dialogue over division, understanding over dominance. It does not believe that progress must come at the cost of others, but that true leadership lies in cooperation. The same way it unites communities at home, India builds partnerships abroad. It doesn't seek to impose its way, but to inspire shared progress. That inclusive mindset, born from centuries of coexistence, is what gives India a unique moral voice on the world stage. But make no mistake, this harmony did not come without challenges. There were moments in history when divisions threatened to tear the nation apart. There were times when faith was tested, when unity seemed fragile. And yet, every time India faced division, it emerged stronger, more aware of its purpose, because at its core, India understands something profound, that the idea of we is always greater than the idea of me. The spirit of togetherness is not a slogan, it is survival. The true beauty of India's diversity is that it encourages creativity. Different cultures bring different perspectives, and from that mix comes innovation in art, music, science, and technology. A nation where multiple worldviews exist side by side becomes a nation that can think in many directions at once. The fusion of old and new, of traditional wisdom and modern ambition, gives India a rare ability to adapt and evolve without losing its soul. This unity and diversity has also shaped the character of India's youth. They grow up learning that difference is not something to fear, but something to understand. They learn that empathy is not weakness, but strength. And as they step into the global arena, they carry with them this philosophy that leadership is not about control, but about connection. They bring collaboration instead of competition, partnership instead of polarization. In a world increasingly divided by identity and ideology, India's story stands as a quiet reminder that progress does not come from eliminating differences, but from finding purpose within them. The strength of this nation lies not in how similar its people are, but in how deeply they care about their shared future. Every festival celebrated, every language spoken, every dream pursued is part of the same heartbeat, one that tells the world we can be many and still be one. In a world often driven by competition and the pursuit of dominance, India's rise stands apart because it is guided not only by ambition but by ESA values. Beyond the skyscrapers and satellites, beyond the technology and trade, India's greatest contribution to the world has been its moral and cultural voice, a voice that speaks softly but carries deeply. It reminds humanity that true progress cannot be measured by wealth alone, but by wisdom, not by power, but by peace. This voice has echoed across centuries through philosophies that have shaped civilizations. India has always believed that leadership begins with balance, between strength and humility, between ambition and compassion. From the teachings of ancient texts to the movements for independence, this nation has led by principle, not by force. Its influence has never come from the power of armies, but from the power of ideas. Ideas of nonviolence, truth, tolerance, and unity. Ideas that transcend politics and touch the soul of humanity. When the world was torn apart by war, India's philosophy of peace offered an alternative vision, one where victory did not require another's defeat. When societies became obsessed with material success, India reminded them of spiritual depth. When global power was measured in weapons, India showed that courage could exist in compassion. And even today, in a century marked by rapid change and uncertainty, India continues to stand for an ancient truth that a nation's strength lies in how it treats the weakest among its people and how it upholds dignity even in disagreement. India's moral influence can be seen not only in its past, but in how it approaches the present. In global conversations on climate, on peace, on equality, India's tone is one of collaboration, not confrontation. It does not demand the world to follow its way, it invites the world to walk together. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. It understands that leadership built on empathy endures far longer than leadership built on fear. That philosophy has guided its diplomacy, its humanitarian efforts, and its partnerships with nations across continents. And perhaps one of India's most profound contributions to the modern world is its cultural diplomacy, the quiet yet powerful way it connects hearts before it negotiates hands. Through yoga, Ayurveda, literature, and art, India has shown that culture is not just entertainment, it is enlightenment. Millions around the world have found balance and peace through practices born from Indian soil. Every time someone rolls out a yoga mat in New York or London, every time a melody rooted in Indian tradition touches a global stage, India's spirit travels with it. It doesn't need to dominate the world to touch it. It influences by example. But what makes this influence truly exceptional is that it carries no arrogance. India doesn't claim to have all the answers. It simply offers perspective. It shows that progress can be kind, that success can be shared, that leadership can be humble. Even in the age of technology and artificial intelligence, it reminds the world that human intelligence, the ability to care, to understand, to forgive, remains irreplaceable. At a time when nations build walls and draw lines, India opens doors. It teaches that diversity does not divide, it enriches. It shows that you can be rooted in tradition yet open to the future, that you can be spiritual without being dogmatic, that you can grow powerful without losing your humanity. In that sense, India's moral and cultural identity is not confined within its borders. It is a gift it has shared with the world. And this voice, this gentle yet unshakable voice, is what has redefined the rules of global leadership. Because in every forum, in every dialogue, India brings with it not just an agenda, but a conscience. It stands not merely as a rising power, but as a reminder of what power is meant for: to uplift, not to oppress, to unite, not to divide. The world listens to India today, not just because of its economic growth or military strength, but because it speaks with authenticity, because its principles are not borrowed, they are lived. From the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, to the practice of nonviolence that inspired global movements, India has consistently shown that greatness is not about how high you rise above others, but how many you lift along with you. So when India steps onto the world stage, it doesn't seek to overshadow others. It seeks to illuminate the path forward, a path guided by compassion, culture, and conscience. It leads not by might, but by meaning. And that moral leadership, that ability to bring light into a world often lost in its own noise, is what makes India not just a participant in global progress, but a guide for it. The heartbeat of modern India lies in its youth, in a generation that is bold, curious, and unafraid to challenge convention. This generation carries the legacy of a civilization thousands of years old, yet it speaks the language of the future. They are the builders of a new India, one that is connected, confident, and creative, and it is through their dreams, their ideas, and their relentless energy that India has begun to redefine the rules of the world. These young minds are not waiting for opportunity. They are creating it across the nation, from the narrow lanes of small towns to the corridors of global corporations. Young Indians are rewriting what success looks like. They are the entrepreneurs launching startups that reach millions, the engineers sending rockets into space, the scientists developing breakthrough solutions, and the artists reimagining identity through film, music, and design. What sets them apart is not just their skill, but their mindset, a mindset that refuses to accept limits, that believes innovation is not the privilege of the few, but the right of all. In every field, the youth of India are leaving a mark that cannot be ignored. They are transforming technology into tools for empowerment. They are taking social media, once a platform for expression, and turning it into a force for education, activism, and awareness. They are merging ancient wisdom with modern science, building bridges between the traditional and the cutting edge. In doing so, they are proving that progress and heritage can coexist, that a nation can move forward without losing sight of its roots. One of the most powerful qualities of this generation is its refusal to wait. The old model of success, of climbing slow ladders, of waiting for permission, no longer defines them. They move fast, adapt faster, and think globally while acting locally. They understand that the challenges of today, climate change, inequality, education, healthcare, cannot be solved by imitation or by hesitation. They demand innovation that serves humanity. Their ambition is not selfish, it is social. They dream not only of personal victory, but of collective progress. The young people of India are also redefining leadership itself. Leadership to them is not about hierarchy, it is about impact. It's about standing up for what's right, speaking truth to power, and using one's voice to make a difference across universities, workplaces, and digital spaces. They are pushing conversations about gender equality, environmental responsibility, and human rights. They are asking the hard questions, not because they are rebellious, but because they care. They want an India that is not just powerful, but principled. Not just successful, but sustainable. And what makes this generation even more extraordinary is their resilience. They are growing up in a fast, changing world, one filled with uncertainty and disruption, yet they face it with optimism, not fear. They see challenges as invitations to create. They use technology not as a distraction, but as a bridge. They build communities online and movements on the ground. They are proving that courage doesn't always look like shouting, Sometimes it looks like building something better in silence. This is the generation that will take India beyond imitation, beyond adaptation, into true innovation. They are the architects of a future that does not just belong to them, but will inspire others across continents. When the world looks at the energy of India's youth, it sees more than potential, it sees possibility. So when we talk about the moment India redefined the rules of the world, we are really talking about them. The young dreamers, thinkers, and builders who refuse to accept the world as it is and insist on shaping it as it should be. They are not just inheriting India's legacy, they are expanding it, and in their hands, the nation's destiny is not only secure but soaring. And so, as we stand at this remarkable point in time, we must recognize that India's story is far more than an account of economic progress or technological achievement. It is a story of the human spirit, a spirit that refused to bow to limitation, that believed in its own potential even when the world did not, and that continues to turn challenges into opportunities with courage and conviction. The moment India redefined the rules of the world was not a single event. It was a movement born in the hearts of its people. From the farmer who cultivates with faith, to the student who dreams without fear, to the innovator who builds without boundaries, each of them carries the same message that greatness is not given, it is created. India's rise is not a triumph of power, it is a triumph of principle. It is a reminder that leadership does not come from conquering others, but from uplifting them. It is proof that a nation's strength is not in its wealth, but in its wisdom, not in its uniformity, but in its unity. The world today watches India not just for what it is becoming, but for what it represents: hope, resilience, and renewal. And as this journey continues, as this generation leads the way forward, one truth will remain: India will not just be a participant in the world's future, it will help define it. Because the moment India redefined the rules of the world was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new era, an era written by its people, powered by its youth, and guided by a vision that sees not just what the world is, but what it can be. That is the promise of India, and that is the power of belief, unity, and purpose that will continue to inspire the world for generations to come.